Hello and welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast. It's your boy Day.
And I'm David, and together we are Call Me Limbo. Today we are creating conversations, and we have such a great guest for you today. She is a friend of Phoebe Award winner. She is a lover of mountain nature hikes. She even got me to go on a couple of them. She's a fierce progressive, a third generation Denverite, an expert on justice reform, the executive director of Women Uprising, which is an organization that recruits and trains progressive women to run for political office. She holds a law degree and a doctorate in education. She's one of the smartest people I know. She's a mother, she's a friend, and she's the person I'm supporting to become Denver's next mayor. Dr. Lisa Calderón is here.
Yay! I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, both of you.
Yay. Well, thank you for doing this. And before we really get into it, I need to do a disclosure. I am the accountant for the Lisa Calderón for Denver mayor campaign. So
And a very good
have
one.
some biases. I have some biases I need to acknowledge right away. I've donated to Lisa's campaign. I have a sign in my window for her. So I'm a big fan, and I've wanted to have you on the podcast for a long time. So thank you for being willing to make this happen.
I have no connection outside of David, so I will be the accountability partner throughout. It'll be fun. No, all jokes aside, we're really excited to chat with you. But of course, it's always important to let our audience know what, if at all, any conflicts or biases up front. But yeah, David, I know you wanted to kind of kick things off.
Yeah. So, all right, Lisa, why do you want to run for mayor? Why do you want to be the mayor?
It's funny when you ask that question because, through Women Uprising, we train women to run for office. And oftentimes a woman has to be asked around 7 times minimally. I think for me, I had to be asked probably more than 20 times before I would even begin to consider it. And so I get that the question is tricky for a woman of color because we are historically not groomed to be politicians. And even that title, I'm really uncomfortable with. I think of myself as a public servant. I have been a community organizer since I've been a child with the migrant farm workers through my mother, who was active with the Chicano student movement. And I was a leader in the Black Student Alliance, an undergrad at Metro State. I mean, really, that's where I learned about formal organizing. I had great mentors. And so it just progressed from there. And what really accelerated all of that was my son was racially profiled numerous times by Denver police. He was assaulted, and I couldn't get anyone to listen to me. And at this point, I was, lecturing up at Boulder, CU Boulder, in the Women's Studies Department around these very issues, and I couldn't even protect my child. And so I started organizing in my community around aggressive police tactics that weren't just hitting youth of color, which was their primary target, but also our elders. Our elders were being stopped and handcuffed behind their back. So this trajectory came out of necessity. It came out of outrage. It came out of not wanting to, or not having our elected officials not hearing my voices and my community's voice. So for me, that question is uncomfortable because it's never been about me. It's always been about our community. And so I'm the face of the We Love Denver campaign, but there is a whole army behind me that, I say, when I get in, we all get in. And so that's the way I really look at it.
I love that. And I think I love the slogan, We Love Denver, which is definitely something we're going to get into a bit more. And understanding that backstory, what draws you to the position, I believe is always important. Equally as important, though, I think before we jump into specific policies, I do think it's important to kind of set expectations with voters and kind of do some basic civics education. So Denver has what's called a strong mayor system. For example, I grew up in Virginia Beach, which has a much weaker mayor where power is spread more throughout council and a city manager. So for those who aren't government nerds, can you kind of talk about what can a Denver mayor actually do And just as importantly, what can't you do without city council, the state legislature, or voters?
In order to talk about our strong mayor system, we have to talk about the Klan because that's the
Yeah.
history that Denver comes from in terms of the Klan in the 1920s really ran our government. They ran our police department. They ran, so all of our institutions were built around this consolidation of power into the strong mayor system. And so we are living with that legacy today, which is really about, um, you know, retaliating against your enemies, crushing them, making sure no one speaks against injustice. So it is written into Denver's DNA to be non revolutionary in the sense of really fighting for people who most need to be heard. Our strong mayor system basically means the mayor gets to do what they want. City council is not really a checks and balances on the mayor. Their main task is to manage the budget, approve contracts over a certain amount of money. The mayor has gotten around that, like the flock cameras, by coming under the required amount. I think it's like 500,000, so he comes right under that. The city council also gets kind of favors from the mayor because they can starve you out. I know that from being the former chief of staff for Councilwoman Candy Sedevaca. They just basically ignored our district as a punishment for Candy winning. So what I want to do is change that and bring the lens of an Afro-Latina, a Black and Mexican American woman is a whole new worldview. This isn't about consolidation of power as it has been throughout our history. It really is about collective power, working collaboratively with city council, working collaboratively on the budgeting process with our community, and making sure that the mayor isn't the one who just sets the budget and then gives it to everybody at the last minute where there's no time to really make any meaningful changes. We've been fighting for the crumbs for so long that we get used to this system and just believe that this is the way it always has to be. And it doesn't. And so I'm here to represent not the past way of doing things, but the possibility of how things can actually be done to lift up the voices of all of us.
I love that answer. And I think kind of diffusing that centralized power because of one, the historical nature of it, but also we're in a different world where we're recognizing the importance of having more democratization in our government, at our workplaces, et cetera. So kind of going with that, what you said, is this a situation where you feel like you all need to actually change I don't know if you all have a charter, I apologize, like how your documents are founded where it's like, it's in stone, or is it just something that you would do in the way that you govern your office?
Yeah, we don't have to change the charter unless we're doing something that is like standing up a new department, which is something that I do intend to do, which is I want to create the office or the Department of Neighborhood Safety. Right now, we have an Office of Neighborhood Safety that came out of community and specifically Dr. Robert Davis and the Reimagining Policing Task Force. And then it was co opted by the city with no real funding. The Department of Public Safety or Community Safety would be like an equivalent to our Department of Public Safety, which gets the biggest amount of funding of any program or service in the city's budget. And so we don't have any checks and balances on the Department of Safety. So we really do need a counterweight. But outside of that, there's a lot of things the mayor can do by executive action. Now, for example, the Office of Human Rights and Community Partnerships, it was named something else before, was an executive created office. And I believe that was under Hancock. And then an ordinance was passed by City Council to then change that to be a permanent fixture so that subsequent mayors can't just change it through, the stroke of a pen through executive action. And so I want to be able to ask community, like, what is it that we need in terms of our offices? How are they functioning? I want to do kind of this complete assessment and definitely a forensic audit of Johnston's spending because we know he's been hiding money and spending money and not accounting for it. The city auditor has told us that. So, there's a lot that the mayor can do without going to the voters, but when it's appropriate, absolutely we need to go to the voters for when we are changing the charter.
Okay, awesome. And I love that you spoke about the budget and the allocation, how you would want to do things. Because one question I had for you was if you became mayor tomorrow and discovered that Denver had a $200 million budget shortfall, what are the first three things that you would refuse to cut? And what are three things that you would actually allow to be on the table?
Well, we will win. So,
Yes.
and we are planning for our first 100 days. So we are both running to win our campaign, but also running to govern.
Love it.
I think we have a great model in Mayor Zoran Mamdani in New York. And he talks to people like they are adults, right? Not like we have to hide the ball and you have to guess how much we're short. He said, when he took the podium soon after he was elected and said, hey, we're in a $12 billion shortfall, folks. And if we don't pass these certain measures, everyone's going to have to pay because it's worse than we even thought it was going to be. And so I plan to do very similar. First, you've got to know how bad the problem is. And I believe that we can do that fairly quickly with getting the right people who know how to do forensic accounting. Not that we'll know the full extent of it, because I'm sure it'll reveal itself as we continue to govern, but we'll have a better idea of exactly how much in the hole. We're being told 200 million. That was from last year. What is it going to be this year? I expect it to be worse. So, knowing that. Now, in terms of what to cut and what to keep, my background really is in criminal justice. I've been a criminal justice professor at Metro State. I teach criminal justice currently at Regis. And so, the pendulum always swings back and forth in terms of lock them up or prevention. And guess what saves us money? Prevention. And that's exactly the programs that Johnston has cut. He's cut the Office of Children Affairs, which has a lot of prevention, violence intervention, mentorship kind of programs. Those save us money down the road. Our crime is up 50%. Guess who is most at risk or being harmed? Young people younger than 28 years old, right? We've had this spike of shootings going on and deaths. I lived through that. When I was an organizer at Metro State, we lost one of our members, Cameron Smith. That was my introduction to drive-by gang violence. And so I don't want to return to that, but you know what? We know that starving the community of resources, of recreation programs, where shootings have now happened, we will restore all of that. And when you save money at the prevention side of it, then the other costs of arrest, prosecution, incarceration, which are the most expensive parts of our budget, we can save money there. So a cost savings there.
Yeah. I think I'm hesitant to I think Mayor Johnson is kind of you're obviously challenging him. And I was like, and I'm not a big fan because I'm supporting you, obviously. But I was like, his state of the city speech just happened. And so I was like, I want to ask you some questions that are related to what he talked about, and something that you just talked about with crime, I think is related. So you're an expert in crime and criminology and criminal justice, and you teach in the criminology department at Regis University, which is why I'm curious of your thoughts on this. The Mayor Johnson said that between 2020 and 2023, Denver averaged 100 homicides per year. Now he claims that number is almost half, and he claims to have driven down crime and driven down homelessness. The reason why he paired the two of those together will never cease to amaze me, but because they're not necessarily the same thing. Homelessness does not necessarily mean crime, but he claims to have driven down both of these more than any city in the country. What's the real story here?
He also threw immigrants under the bus in that one too, as if conflating all of those things together. The real story is that, I know that he likes to take credit for reducing crime. He had nothing to do with reducing crime. Crime was down across the nation. The reason why is that, the historic investments that President Biden made started taking fruition. It takes a while once you invest in the programs that I talked about, violence prevention, but really what brings down crime is stability, housing stability, job stability, and then those mental health supports, we also know that one of the big drivers of inequity is, racism and sexism and all of those equalities. So when we raise the bar to give people more opportunities so people can make better choices out of bad options, then we see stabilization of families and communities. So he had nothing to do with the crime trend that was reducing across the nation. And if anything, I want him to take credit for the crime spike of the 50% increase of homicides. Now, again, he can say that crime was down in every other category, again, part of the national trend, but spiking 50% is not a national trend. That is a Mike Johnston trend. And so rather than addressing the root causes of violence, we have to think of violence as an epidemic through a public health lens. And so it's infectious. And we saw that with the recent shootings at the nightclub, that a beef started at a party earlier in the day that was supposed to be fun, and then carried on into the evening. Well, several people are infected with that rage, that anger, that need to retaliate. And if we don't have violence interrupters that are trusted people in the community, identifying that, intervening in that, and are helping to prevent things to get worse, then they're going to escalate, just like any kind of, epidemic. And we need to look at violence as an epidemic, and we need to respond accordingly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, and you mentioned it as well, housing is one component of this, and making sure that people are housed affordably is one component of violence reduction. I've got to ask you about this too. So the mayor mentioned affordable housing a few times in his State of the City speech, and how some rents have come down by 10%. The market is catching up, is what that's doing. But he took credit for it. He said that he has delivered 6,000 affordable units of housing where people pay no more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So sounds a little bit like social housing to me, but exactly, laughter. Exactly. And so, like, a key component of your housing plan from your website, lisafordenver.com, which we will link to in the show notes so you can go read more, is to build permanently affordable housing and social housing using city land and surplus buildings. Mayor Johnston also introduced this Mile High Line thing, where there's 7 locations across the city where he hopes to build 20,000 new housing units. And he described this Mile High Line as, quote, connected, affordable, and owned by the people who live here. It sounded like he was going to turn it over to developers. So that doesn't sound like social housing to me. But this rhetoric sounds a little like social housing. Is it? No.
It is the farthest from social housing. And,
yeah. And why is your housing plan better?
Yeah. So my plan is better because it actually is social housing. It isn't giving millions and millions in, corporate kickbacks. This Mile High Line, we need to really call it, the accelerating of gentrification, fault line, because that's what we're going to see. I'm coining the phrase here that this is a Denver's renters paradox. When on the one hand, you have affordable, with air quotes, units that are, going vacant versus those that are, truly deeply affordable, which people are bypassing. Well, why are they bypassing that? They have these onerous requirements they have to reapply every year. I mean, imagine for any of us to justify where we're living. And we know our incomes go up and down. In a social housing model, once you get in, you're in. Once you qualify, you qualify. It's not just meant to be from year to year. It's meant to be for generations. And for those who aren't familiar with social housing, look at the Seattle model. The voters voted overwhelmingly to fund social housing, which means it's city-owned land. It's a city-owned developer, or they contract with the developer to manage those funds in the interest of the people of the city. And so instead of going to for-profit developers and being, subject to their whims and to their AMIs and all of that, we instead say, hey, community sits on the board. Community sets the rates, and it's mixed income so that you do have some higher income earners, but they offset the lower income earners like students, right? And so everybody gets a fantastic place to live. I lived in the projects as a child. I don't believe in the concentration of poverty. I saw what that does to people. I saw how that limits your worldview. And so having a community that really is around mixed incomes, mixed ethnicities, mixed cultures, is really the kind of community we need. We are suffering from a loneliness epidemic. And so, post COVID, right? And so people are feeling so much more distance from each other. Social housing is also building a community together, and it's sustaining and not just from year to year.
Yeah, Lisa,
So,
something that I really, real quick, Dave, like something that I really like about your housing platform and your housing focus is on the permanently affordable piece. I was like, I think I've shared this with you. I was like, I live in income restricted housing. I was like, I purchased my four to own townhome back in 2019, and there were income qualifications that were paired with it, and it was very onerous to go through the process. And I was like, I would love to see that process be made a little easier, but the deed restriction on my home is for 15 years of affordability. That doesn't solve the problem in the long term. And I'm also concerned that once the value of my home switches to market rate, the property taxes are going to become to a point where like they're almost unaffordable. And so I was like, I really like the focus on permanent affordability that you are talking about and that you're thinking about.
Yes, I mean, they have it in other countries, and I know people are like, oh, well, that's Europe. But hey, why look at the Vienna model? And, this came about after World War II and needed to house a bunch of people. And so this was really looked at into generations. So they're turning over homes to their next generation. And that's super important. Right now, we are just so much in the temporary and so much trying to catch up with our neighbors. It's just, it feels like that we're in a rat race. The other thing I wanted to point out was that, Johnston, instead of giving, these millions in corporate subsidies to his friends and his donors, let's make that very clear. They are part of creating these policies. They could be, the city could be engaged in land back options, such as with the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea neighborhood, who are trying to negotiate the land for what they call the triangle, which was land that was taken away. Those were homes, those were businesses. And through them suing to stop highway expansion, which of course they lost because the highway expanded of I-70, but they did get a mitigation fund. And with that fund that was seeded with $2 million, they were able to buy land and build homes on it. But guess what? They are getting crumbs from National Western as an optional fee that gets paid into. They need a dedicated fee to grow that fund, to keep it, that 2 million replenished, which it's not anywhere near that right now.
Right.
I love that. And I love that you're able to draw that distinction between people who, it's very easy to get lost in the propaganda. It's no matter if it's someone I love or someone I disagree with, every office has to promote what they're doing. But I think when it comes to housing in particular, we hear so many buzzwords like David was saying, oh, we were doing this with social housing is blah, blah, blah. But when you really get in the weeds, you're like, it's not what I thought it was. And I think a lot of that, like you said, is because of the influence of the donor class. So I have to ask, if a developer came to you wanting to build 500 market apartments with no affordability requirements, would you approve it?
No. And let's also be clear, the developers aren't just the for-profit ones. We need to cultivate relationships with nonprofit developers, and we need to accelerate that. So they don't have the profit motive, so that we're always at the mercy and getting a few affordable units for, as David mentioned, a few years, really, relatively speaking. We know what happens when we have a limited amount of affordability or a limited number of years. This happened out in Green Valley Ranch. Remember, with the HOAs took homes from homeowners who had fees for like too many cars parked in front of their house or weeds growing. They took entire homes, even these deed restricted affordability homes, they took them. And the city did not protect those buyers. So that's the other piece is we need to have a city attorney's office that is willing to fight for homeowners and fight for renters. And we don't have that right now.
That's a great point because you have a lot of competing interests when it comes to being mayor. You have people in the business community, you have your constituents. And so I'm very curious, even with a strong mayoral system, you can't govern alone. So can you kind of tell us about a time you've had to convince someone who does fundamentally disagree with you? How were you able to go about that? And what did you learn about yourself in governing?
My master's thesis was on conflict resolution and
Mm.
specifically ethical communication, a method of social transformation. And what that means is recognizing that conflict is part of our human process. For people who are like, we want no conflict, you need to be more civil, you need to be quieter. That's usually, white, wealthy politicians who are like, you shouldn't speak as loudly as you do. And so that's ludicrous, right? That's not what conflict is about. We need to have conflict because of the creativity. We look at our beautiful Rocky Mountains. That was created out of conflict. So if anything, I do not want a rubber stamp cabinet who just says, all of your ideas are great. Instead, I want to be challenged. I want to hire people smarter than me in certain areas I don't have expertise in. That's how I've always run organizations. And so having the smartest people around you, having the smartest people who are willing to challenge your thought process, that's how we grow. And so, I can't think of just one because I think that, okay, let me give you actually the flock camera, debacle with the chief of police, Denver police. And, he has maintained this position that there's nothing we can do to change flock cameras. There's nothing that we can do to reduce his reversal on police discipline. And I have been fierce in challenging because I was part of the group that revised the use of force standards for Denver police, along with Elizabeth Epps, Dr. Robert Davis. And they basically took us for a ride. They threw all of that out the window during the Black Lives Matter protests. So I learned my lesson that don't have me at the table and use me as a way to beat people up in the streets. And so you're going to hear my mouth constantly whenever you continue to backslide on our civil rights. Now, Chief Thomas is still moving forward with that, but we got a win in terms of community galvanized and are still galvanizing and resisting his changes, being a force against Mike Johnston's changes. And that really does set up our next administration so that we can have better accountability, that we're raising awareness with community about why the Office of the Independent Monitor's Office is needed, why the Citizen Oversight Board is needed. So every win from conflict doesn't necessarily come right away, but this is a long game that we have to continue to fight.
Lisa, I love listening to you talk. And like I really do. I have been told that I have a strong sense of justice. And it is so nice to hear someone else like with a really strong sense of justice and also like being willing to like take on powers that be to create a more like equitable world. Like I don't know, where does your strong sense of justice come from? I really admire it.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's from becoming, of experiencing injustice from the time that I was a child. Being born Black, Latina, poor, to a teenage mother and father, like you are not meant to succeed in this world. And you learn that very quickly as a child. I remember sitting in Catholic school. I went to public and private school when I was little. And to go to Catholic school, we were the janitors. That was the way we had to pay our tuition. And I remember seeing a little white girl crying and getting the nuns' attention right away. I was like, oh, I'm going to try that because maybe I can get some. I cried. They could care less. And I learned that in the 4th grade, right? I learned that in being bused across town from my community to by then it was a white working class community, and being thrown with a brick to my head and being called, the N-word, and there was no one around. Teachers had looked the other way. So I knew that I had to advocate for myself pretty, throughout my life. And especially when I was a single parent and I had my Black baby boy. And the fact that he was being discriminated against from the time that he was born because he had, health issues and asthma that wasn't being attended to. So I had to learn to fight through necessity, not because anyone opened the door for me. It's because people closed the door to me. I'm also a victim. I'm a survivor of domestic violence from childhood to teenagehood. And so, I think about those men who should have protected me the most and harmed me. Who hurt them, right? It took me a while to get that perspective, but that's why I co-founded with Community, the Community Reentry Project, because I thought, what if my former abuser, my grandfather, my father had a reentry program like the one we've created in Community? How much suffering would we have not had to go through as a family? And that they had to go through, that they think that they had to take it out on the rest of us, right? So I know that trauma creates trauma, but also love and caring creates more love and caring. And just the last thing I'll say about that is one of the seminal books in my life that really changed my worldview was Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider. That I read as an undergrad. And it gave me that perspective as a Black student leader, as a Black woman, that your rage is a survival skill. That anger is a tool that tells you to pay attention, to excavate the truth, and warn you of danger. But it has to have an outlet or it will eat you from the inside out. And so my outlet from having my rage eat me up every day, right? Every day you can wake up and feel rageful at the injustice in the world, whether it's a federal level or the city level. And that is politics and trying to change those systems that take away our voices. And that's why I do it. It is my mental health care, believe it or not, in addition to hiking.
Yes. Well, yeah, thank
So
you
you
for
had me
sharing.
until the hiking. I
Yeah.
was with you until the hiking, but I'm trying to work my way there slowly,
I'm going
very
to convert
slowly.
you. If I got David, you're coming with us.
Yes. And I told Lisa too. I think I've talked about this too. I was like, hiking is I'm not going to self-initiate it, but if someone invites me, I'll try to go. So thank you for always inviting me with you.
I love that.
That's been
So
fun.
getting to some of our last quick questions here. So I wanted to kind of get a little bit deeper into pretty much essentially, every mayor only gets so much political capital, even though I do believe the tide is changing in the sense that I do believe if you talked about that first 100 days, I do believe people are very gracious when they see you doing the things and it can extend your capital life shelf. But I'm curious if you could realistically pass only one major initiative during your first year, what would that be? And why does that take priority over everything else for you?
Housing. So let me connect the dots here. Housing, homelessness, public safety, affordability. They are all connected. And I have been a over 30 years service provider. Again, starting with victims of domestic violence. I was a legal director who went to court with women for protection orders. I advocated for their charges to get dropped when they were arrested for self-defending. And then I went from 12 years working in that field to 8 years working with incarcerated people. And I found that, trauma is two sides of that same coin. And if we can address trauma, then so much harm in our families and our communities could be reduced. But you can't necessarily get that stability if you don't have a home. And that often keeps victims feeling like they have no other options because it's either on the street or staying with someone who's abusing them, but at least they have a roof over their head. Or when I worked with incarcerated folks, when they would come out of jail, it's a stability factor. I go back to selling drugs because I can't afford rent? Or can I get a roof over my head so I can clear my head, get counseling, get job skills training, whatever it is? And I knew that if we're able to put them in a room, in a home, eventually that was a trajectory. If we could find them, we could serve them. If we can't find them, we can't serve them, right? If they're living under a bridge and they're moving constantly, we can't find them. So housing is that core stability. And that's why I have been a proponent of housing first. The research says it works, not the housing first that Mike Johnston claims to do, right? He co-ops a lot of our social justice and our progressive language. And let me also make this clear. He did not reduce homelessness by 64%. That is a lie. It is playing with the numbers. He took the point in time count, which is a federal count that has always been flawed since it was implemented in 2005. And it has always been flawed because, one, there's no common training for it. So everybody counts differently. Two, it occurs during one of the coldest months of the year in January, when people are not just in shelters, which do get counted, but they are couch surfing. They are in their cars. People aren't, it's not an accurate count. And three, it is always an undercount of the people who are most vulnerable. There was a study recently done that the undercount could be as high as 35%. And so it's always been flawed, and it is especially flawed for people of color, for Black, Indigenous, Latino, always an undercount, for young people who are at a rising risk, for elders who are at increased risk, and for the chronically homeless who just drop off of the map. So the only group that it is being reduced for, whether it's in Denver, Colorado, or nationally, is veterans. And in part, that's because we did a very concerted effort to assist veterans with intentionality. But all those other groups, you notice he did not mention in his speech. So I'm here to call BS on his 64%. And also to call BS on other media outlets like 7 News recently ran a story that parroted his statistics, gave him credit for reducing homelessness, and did none of their own independent fact checking. And so that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about it, is it's not hard to figure out. There is an annual study that is done in Colorado that digs deeper into these statistics, and Johnston is not using them. He is using the weakest form of counting people, which is the point in time survey.
Yeah.
It's amazing how one can manipulate the numbers. They say numbers don't lie. Now, numbers don't lie. The people who use them and manipulate them do. So it's really great to have someone highlighting that, because most people, it's intentional. We're busy. We have lives. We're just seeing the headline. Okay, it's crime down 64%. But it takes people like yourself running to expose how the wool is being pulled over our eyes, and that those numbers aren't actually they're just propaganda. So thank you for, exposing that and having that conversation with us today for the constituents there, because a lot of longtime Denver residents feel like they've got to the point where they can't afford to live in the city they grew up anymore. So if someone asked you, who is Denver being built for today? What would your answer be?
Well, I know who I'm building Denver for. And so it's being built for, through Johnston's initiatives, white, wealthy, landowning millionaires and billionaires, right? So that's leaving out a whole lot, including young white people who are also struggling in this economy. What I'm building toward is, equitable housing for everybody. That when we are exposed to each other, we benefit, we flourish as a society. And so by doing that, we have to reject these short-term feel good, flourishy speech, 10,000 jobs, even though he can't hold on to 171 city employees, or 25 or 20,000 houses, even though he's done nothing to bring down housing affordability. And so I know what it's like to live in housing that is low because, when I was a single parent and I was able to afford a 2-bedroom home with my son in Park Hill. You don't have that option anymore. I want to return that option to people. Again, housing stability is an equalizer across race, across gender. When people feel safe in their homes, then they can thrive and start thinking from survival mode into what is my next possibilities. And so I want everybody who loves Denver to think about, what do they want in our first 100 days? What is most important to you? And please let us know at lisafordenver.com. We would love to hear from you.
Yes. I've got the last question. And you set me up so perfectly for it. Why do you love Denver?
Oh my goodness. Denver. Well, so I'm third generation Denverite. And it's not just my bias of living here. I've traveled all across the nation. I've traveled internationally. And every time that plane comes over those Rocky Mountains, I'm home, right? I just breathe that, I missed home. It's my family,
Mm,
my community, and I'm willing to fight for them.
yeah. Yeah. And you have been, and you haven't stopped fighting. And some candidates run once and disappear, and you haven't. You continue to show up in community and for community. I see you all over town. And 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 you
Yeah.
haven't backed away from a fight. And I was like, Denver would be so much better off. I love Denver too. Denver is my home as well, and I love it so much. And that feeling of like flying in over the bumps on as the bumps on the plane as I'm coming back into town, or even driving back home from Nebraska when I visit my family and coming over here to visit as a kid. I was like, Denver has always felt like home to me, and Denver deserves a leader for mayor like Dr. Lisa Calderón. And so that's why I'm so happy to support you and endorse you. Your campaign has had over 100 endorsers already. The campaign raised
Yeah.
more in 1 week than in the first 2 months of the 2023 race in terms of funds. You're the first 2027 mayoral candidate to qualify for the Fair Elections Fund. And I think you've got this. I think you can win, but we have to show up, and we have to Lisa's showing up for us, and it's now time for us to show up for her and to get her into this seat. So Lisa, where
Can
can
I?
we support you? And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to address that, it's 3 times. She's run 3 times. And so therefore, like, do you really think that this is easy to break this? We started off with a conversation about the Klan and the legacy of the Klan. And do you think that that's just broken because I've tried it once, which I had no political experience, and I still came in third.
Yeah.
And then and that was against Hancock. And then when I ran against Johnston, I got, even closer, missed the runoff by, less than 2%. And that was running for only 7 months. And now we've doubled our time of running. And so for anyone who is critical of like, oh, she's, doing it for a third time, that's tenacity.
Yes.
That's persistence.
Yes.
That's love of this city.
Yeah.
I am unwilling to back down. I'm unwilling to give up. And that's the kind of fighters that we should have, not some millionaire from Vail, Mike Johnston, who was looking for his next political seat. He was supposed to run for governor, and then, he got boxed out of that. And then there was a possibility he would get appointed to Bennett's seat if Bennett won for governor. Well, he doesn't have that. So now he's stuck with Denver that he made a mess of, that really he was going to run just one term of on his trajectory to president of the United States. And what I'm saying is that I don't have any other aspirations. This is my home. And I'm willing to fight for it. And I'm willing to fight a millionaire backed by billionaires for the future of it.
And I'd like to say, Lisa, if I may, that I'm young enough to remember and another credible Black woman who said, if at first you don't succeed, you dust yourself off and try again. And I do believe that that is often the legacy of people from marginalized communities. We don't always get it the first time because we didn't grow up in those cultures. We weren't accepted in those spaces, but we learn, we adapt, and we outsmart the system. And I can tell from this conversation that you've done the work to not only understand the history of Denver, to understand the political system that you'd be walking into, but how to actually change the game and open that door for others to walk through so that they never, ever, ever have to experience what it used to be. So thank you for your bravery. Thank you for spending time with us to talk about why Denver should vote for you and what Lisa mayoral vision is for the city of Denver.
Thank you so much. And I'm doing it for my children. So hi, Taj and Savannah.
Yes.
Hey, hi, Taj and Savannah.
Another campaign.
Greatest legacy. Your greatest legacy. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Lisa, where can people support you in the campaign?
So go to lisafordenver.com. And what else? That's all of our handles too. So we're on Insta, Facebook, Blue Sky, and X.
Yes. Yes. We will link to everything in the show notes. But Dr. Lisa Calderón, thank you. This has been a dream. Thank you. Go support Lisa. Go vote for her. The election is in April of next year. You will see Lisa out in the community. You will hear more from her. Hopefully, we will get to hear more from her. You have an open invitation back if you want it, Dr. Lisa. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with a friend. Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the platform where you listen. Get in touch with us at Call Me Limbo Pod on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Threads. Send us an email at callmelimbopod@gmail.com. Go subscribe to our Substack, callmelimbopod.substack.com, or go become a Patreon member at patreon.com/callmelimbopod. And, Day and Dr. Lisa, guests don't always get this. It's like I always say, I'm becoming one of those people that complains about traffic noise. So expect to hear some more from me about traffic calming measures on the campaign.
Looking forward to it. And in fact, we should do a new TikTok video around transit. So I'll get with my transit supporters and figure that out.
Perfect. I love it. Well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Lisa. And remember, when they go low,
we elect Dr. Lisa Calderón to become Denver's next mayor. So call me Limbo. Goodbye.